All right. So hello again, Lucas. And yeah, this time around we have another interesting topic on our hands, and we're going to talk a bit about, how to start with and how to scale creator marketing. And this is something we've been getting quite many questions from customers about as well, because what we see a lot of times is that they are at very different stages of their experience of working with creators, let's say, because some of them are only getting started. They've never done it before on YouTube, at least, even if they've done a little bit on other platforms. Some of them are very seasoned at working with creators already. They've signed some really big stars and so on. Um, and then there are also some more like special cases. So if someone needs to do a big push, like a product launch, let's say, I think that's one very common thing, common scenario that we come across as well. So I figured it would be good for us to cover these three different scenarios and what are the best practices in all of them, and what to keep in mind, and so forth. So let's go forward from there. But yeah, any
Sounds
kind of like
good.
before we dive into the more precise scenarios themselves, any other kind of more general thoughts from your side on this?
General thoughts on how to start and how to scale. I mean, that's definitely two different topics, and they need to be addressed both separately. I think like we did a pretty good job at like compiling it in like three potential like scenarios, but in reality, there's like so many different like cases based on like the product, the brand, how they think about their brand, the brand safety, all the different departments, how the team is like organized internally, how they work, and we talk about this in the previous conversation. So we'll try to like compile it into one, but I think we could definitely come back to just how to start and really like walk through if you are a game launching, if you just want to uh, scale a bit the UA that you have on a specific game. That's definitely a big session, and then yeah, scaling. That's why we're here. And that's what we do best. Like the small to mid-sized creator levels that we have access to really helps us to just like go from like one time big deal, two times to 20, 100, 3,000 plus integrations that we've run with some of our clients over the past like few years. So there's definitely potential in like scaling high in number of like creators that you onboard with, the number of like integrations that you have. It's not for everyone, it's not for all brands, but like in a way, I think that's what you have in this article, is that almost every brand can work with like creators. The question is how, and there's like different ways to do it, and first you need to check that it's possible. So yeah, let's definitely cover that scenario as well, and see where it takes us.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think like one good thing to remember is that, no matter where you start, your approach also needs to evolve with time, because like when you get more experience, you get more budgets and so on. The stuff that was working initially just, it's not going to work forever. So I think that's important to remember as well, that you need to evolve your approach over time. But maybe we start from, right at the beginning. If you've never worked with YouTube creators before, you might have worked with creators on other platforms, but if YouTube creators are a completely new medium to you, I think this is a very, very typical use case. And what I would highlight here is that you need to remember what you're trying to prove, right? So you're trying to prove that a channel or a medium, maybe in this case, works for you. And on YouTube, this actually means two different things. It means, do you have the supply? Meaning, can you find enough creators that are interested in your products, that they will do good quality video, and they're interested in doing the sponsorships, and what they say about it is authentic. But then there's also the demand, so the audience or your potential customers. And the answer to either of these questions is no, then it might mean that YouTube maybe isn't the right medium for you, or YouTube creators might not be the right medium for you. Um, Maybe YouTube ads would be a better approach in some of these scenarios.
Mm.
And on top of that, I think you need to prove that, do the unit economics work as well. So, what's the lifetime value of one user for you? So can you acquire, based on that cost, that value versus what the advertising cost is going to be, will it be meaningful to you? So I think those are kind of the most important things. And maybe on the metric side, I would also mention that you need to remember that true performance in any channel takes time. So, when you're starting out, you shouldn't be expecting insanely good results in terms of ROI from the beginning. Doesn't mean you can't get them. But, the most common thing is that, when you start with a new channel, you kind of work on it gradually to improve the results. You figure out what's working for you and kind of reach the results that way. So when you're just starting out, that's why it's important to look at kind of the higher funnel metrics, meaning engagement rates, comments, view rates, click rates, these kinds of things, which will tell you, do the people watching the video material about your product find it interesting overall? And then, you need to consider the ROI and work gradually to improve that. So you shouldn't be too quick about making those assumptions of performance, let's say.
Yeah. How do we put it into like clear examples on the supply and the demand? I think like the one thing I was thinking about, like the supply that we've seen over the past years is social casinos being one type of product that clearly there's a demand for it. There's like players, there's a lot of money going into it. But is this something a YouTube channel actually wants to promote? That's something that we've seen that it's really difficult. So that's the first thing. That's an example that could show that, okay, you could have a product that works, but for that medium, potentially not. So that's one. And then same for the demand. I don't have like an example on that.
Well, I would maybe say that one thing you can look at, I already mentioned those engagement rates. So one thing is that, if you look at some of the kind of your industry averages or things like this, if your engagement rate is very, very low, meaning you run some campaigns and there's just very little kind of traffic coming from it, or the video gets very little engagement, and also if you don't see any, because YouTube sponsorships by their nature also affect your organic traffic if they're successful. So if there's very little organic traffic increases when the content comes out, I would say that then that's something where you can make these kinds of conclusions that, if the engagement isn't there, then it probably means the audience doesn't find it interesting. So typically it means you need to look for other kinds of targeting, or maybe this is not the right medium for you in this case.
Now I remember on the demand example that I have, I think it's products for that are specifically targeting like women. So that's one category. That's same. There's like a lot of like mobile games or like other products that are specifically targeting like a women audience. But if someone is like interested to find women interested in gaming, that's actually quite a scarce supply or demand, I would say, on YouTube. So you can get creators to like promote the game because they think it's a cool game. That's fine. But then if your target audience is like women, and that you can only find a small amount per each channel, that's something that could be in the end not so successful in terms of like ROI, because you might pay quite a lot. So we're always happy to like test those cases, but I think over the past months, that's really the one scenario that we feel is really complicated, and that's where in that it's probably better to go with like few super segmented channels versus like a scalable approach, I think. So
Yeah, that's actually a very good example. And I think one other thing we didn't cover yet that you do need to remember is that, again, what you're trying to prove is that does YouTube work for me? And very often,
Mhm.
we see advertisers, the way they go about testing this is that they hire kind of one big name. They pay, I don't know, 20, $30,000 for like a YouTube star. And then they run the campaign, and then they're like, hey, the results were great, or hey, the results were poor, and make a decision based on that. But if you do it this way, you're not actually testing how YouTube works as a channel. You're testing if that one individual creator works for your audience. And I mean, if you find that out, great, but it just doesn't predict how creators more broadly are going to work for you at all, I think. So the more reasonable approach to doing this would be that, start with smaller creators. Unless you have a very big budget to start with, then it makes sense, I think, to hire creators of all sizes. But if you have a moderate budget to start with, hire somewhere around 20 creators, for example. It's perfectly reasonable amount to get with, I don't know, 20, 25K USD budget, for example, because that already gets you a much, much better idea of how the channel works, generally speaking, and not how an individual creator works.
Reminds me of how I started influencer marketing. Pretty much did that exact mistake. So happy happy to not do it again and try to like advocate for others not to do it. Long story short, we had discovered that YouTube was like the perfect medium for our acquisition of like users. Like, won't go into the details too much, but basically the product was incentivized downloads, and you could get like free points that would convert into like free gift cards. And it was right at a time where Clash of Clans was big and everyone wanted like free gems, and that was like the perfect alignment. People wanting free gems, and we had a way to basically like supply it to them. So what we found is like, let's go to all the Clash of Clans channels on YouTube and try to make like a deal, like an affiliate deal with them. And it was working, it was perfect. But then at some point, so we were in the situation where we staled in growth, and we said, okay, maybe we need to start working with like channels that are not accepting those like type of like affiliate deals. So we need to do like a more like a sponsorship integration. And I don't really remember exactly how I found this particular channel, but it was like a French lifestyle slash gaming channel, and I got the price for it. And then I was like, yeah, 11,000 euros. That's quite a huge investment compared to like our cost per install. But then somehow we got pitched and we said, okay, let's give it a try, and then we'll know if this works for us or not. I don't really remember the results. What I remember is probably like a spike on that day, and then it was like fine, but then it kind of like died down. But like what we're discussing now is like, I did not prove the channel. I just like proved that this channel worked on like one particular video, and then maybe it was like a ROI positive on that, but I really did not prove the channel. And then I was like back to square one, trying to find more channels that would be like somehow similar to try to get those learnings. I was definitely in a different stage of like my career, but that's definitely the point that I could see like someone make. You're just like interested by that shiny object that you think is like the perfect match, and that would like answer all your questions. Go for it, but then you don't answer the right question. So
Yeah, that's actually like I think a very good story. I've had some pretty similar experiences in the past when I was working in online travel, where we hired a couple of like really big influencers to promote our travel product, basically. But then at the end of the day, it just wasn't scalable managing those one-off contracts, and especially when I was working with the Finnish market, which is a very small and very specialized language and everything, creators just like hiring them, trying to find these individuals and then going from there just wasn't successful there. We actually at the end of the day decided that it was a much better strategy to just like increase the ad budgets, because you were able to do that in what, 10, 15 minutes versus, how much time it takes to get the same reach with creators. So you have to kind of think about the scalability and also like the broader proving the channel more broadly right from the beginning, I think. But
how,
yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
then like, what do we say to our younger selves on how do we do it? Like, how do we improve the channel if we assume that, okay, the product is none of those that we like mentioned, and there's potentially like supply and demand works, and we have that assumption. How would we go to like prove it?
Yeah, so I mean, how I would go about it, like I mentioned, I would hire a big enough pool of creators for the first campaign, so at least 20. Depending a bit on your budget needs, it could even be more, if you
Mm-hmm.
have more budget available, or what kind of creator sizes are available and so on. But I would definitely go with at least 20 creators. I would target fairly broadly because you want kind of general understanding. Is this channel more feasible? If you want to do more specialized targeting or explore more topics in the future, that's fine, but I wouldn't start from there. So go with fairly broad targeting. For example, target every channel in the video game category, or maybe even like all look for creators in all channels. What you just need to look for is that they have enough reach in the markets you care about, and this is something Matchmade can look for up for you automatically, for example. But just ensure that you're reaching enough in your key markets with those creators that you can actually make reliable conclusions. Then release the content, make sure that it's put out, let's say within a 1 week time frame or so. Could be a bit longer as well, but that those videos come out in a relatively short time frame, and then you wait a bit and see from the analytics how it has performed once the content has run. Then you could look at those engagement rates, click-throughs, view rates, so on. And if you have kind of industry or competitor data to compare to, definitely look at where you stand in it compared to that. If you're roughly on the same level or even better, I think that's a great indication that you're doing great. Also, if the creators kind of accept your deals very fast, and the acceptance rate overall is really good, that tells you that, hey, the supply is probably going to be scalable, so you're going to be able to get more creators like this in the future as well.
Mm.
And that's kind of where I would start with it. And then once you kind of have these learnings, then start thinking about, okay, how do I run this on a recurring basis? How do I scale this up and so on? But this is where I would start. And if we're talking about recommended budgets, I would say 25K euro or dollars. This is the scale I would say it makes sense to start looking at if this works. Of course, it can work on a smaller scale as well, but you do need sufficient amounts of data to have strong conclusions. And I would say that's typically what we recommend to new customers, like starting from that level. So 20-25K and up from there.
Because this is potentially giving you a couple million views. Like anything below this will be like more in the thousands of views. So yeah, and then one point that you said is like that's actually specific to what we do, like how fast we can allocate like a budget, but that's not so common in traditional influencer marketing, because if it's like a one-on-one negotiation with like contract or whatever, but our system actually like allows us to just like send offers to creators, and then the creators that are in our platform just have to accept or decline those offers based on the brief that we give them, the price that we want to pay for it. And to give you an example, yeah, like a 15, 20, 25K, it's a matter of like hours in terms of like allocating these budgets to 20, 25 creators. So yeah, definitely if we see this, it's a really good sign that creators are interested to promote the product and will potentially do a good job at doing it.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point that, with us, you can lock it in very fast. If you're doing it more manually, then you have to account for longer time between starting the content publishing window, and you just need to reserve more time for the negotiations overall to kind of get enough creators to release their content within a specific time frame. So just something to take into consideration if you're not using Matchmade to do this kind of experimentation, let's say.
The process can be done on your own. It's just like how much time you want to put into it. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. But I think like that's also where we kind of get to the next scenario. So, you've run this test or you've already worked with creators, you know that there's potential there. So then you want to make it bigger, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what you want for any kind of marketing channel, that it performs and it brings you a meaningful amount of business. So you want to scale creators up, and I think this is kind of the scenario number two, where you have already some experience and you want to make it bigger. And I think at this point, what you really need to start doing is branching out. Typically, how brands who have gotten into creator marketing earlier have done this is that they've hired those bigger names, or maybe had like an agency roster that's enabled them to get started with this. Um, and I'm not saying that's bad, definitely not, because if you have like a good big name YouTuber that's bringing you great results, that's awesome, and you definitely should keep working with them. But if you think about the time that goes into running these influencer campaigns, like you said, if you need to do the manual negotiations and all of this, it's just going to be so time intensive to scale this up. And the big names only have very limited inventory available themselves as well. So at that point, you do need to start broadening it out, and you need to start working with creators of all sizes, from the very small nano creators all the way to the bigger names, right? And I think that's also where you do need to take into consideration that you need some kind of automation to do this, because otherwise the cost you need to pay to the agency to manage, if you need to do 50 creators a month or 100 creators a month, something like this, the time you need to do it manually, whether that's, hiring an in-house team or paying an agency to do it, like the costs will just get so big and the hours spent so massive that you do need some kind of automation to do this at meaningful scale.
Agreed. And I think uh, what I see in like the tooling space to like work on like influencer marketing workflows, there's like different levels of like automations. There's like the level of like automations that you need to push the buttons for, which saves you a little bit of time, but you still have to put in the work. I think I'm thinking about all those like creator search tools, or all those like negotiation platforms that help you do the back and forth, the contracts and the message. That's one level of like automation, but like the level of automations and when you remove yourself totally from the process, and that's more our sweet spot. So I don't know if there's so many that would do like similarly. There's like potentially some like self-serve platform out there, but yeah, just to point that out, that's definitely different levels of automations on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the first level is, like you said, it's sort of the creator CRM platforms, I guess you could call them, where it's just messaging capabilities. You can reach out to them. Maybe there's a few examples of the stuff they've already done, things like this. But then it's, they don't take care of the other automation. So kind of like, if you automate the full life cycle, you can actually save a lot more time with managing all the payouts to the different creators. You only get one invoice versus, every influencer invoicing you separately, doing the pricing and the contract negotiations, all of it automatically. You don't even need to do the outreach yourself.
No.
You just need to kind of give the parameters of what's kind of the audience demographics you're looking for, what are the markets you care about the most. I think that's kind of the other end of the spectrum, where we are more that you can do the full funnel automation. And just one interesting stat, I wanted to mention, that why should you hire these mid-size and smaller creators? If you look at who's producing all of the content out there on the internet, so of all the social media views in the world, 65% of them are generated by these mid-size and smaller creators, and out of all creators, mid-size and smaller is actually something like 99% of all of them. So if you're not working with them, you're only working with 1% of the potential talent pool, and I think that's just like massively missing out on the opportunity.
Yeah. But that's what we touched on before. It's like if you have a limited amount of like time during the day, you make it easy for you and you just work with one or few contacts. And that's the thing. It's like if in this topic you want to scale the medium, there's like two ways to do it. You can work with like CRM tools, but then the way you're going to be able to like scale this is just by hiring more people in your team. And that's totally fine. We've seen like successful brands on like creator marketing do it. That's definitely one approach. What we've seen is that the different approach is like you don't have to scale your team to actually do it if you rely more on that automation that we can provide, where it's like you remove yourself from the process, but you still understand what's the output, you understand the performance, and you keep iterating and keep testing different things. That's how we've been scaling it up with some of our historical clients. As mentioned, like more than like 3,500 integrations over the past years, just because they didn't scale their team, they just scaled the budget and what they wanted to test with us, and how we keep broadening this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is also something, when you are hiring more creators, you're also spreading out the risk a bit. And what you can do there is as well is that, you can keep hiring the creators that perform well for you, but you can also, drop the ones that have poor performance and then keep bringing in new ones as well. So you can also, once you have these automated methods, you can actually kind of make the iteration cycle a lot faster as well. So you kind of start discovering those creators that work for you automatically and gradually, and you can kind of keep working with them on a recurring basis much more easily as well, when you're able to kind of go through a larger pool of potential partners or potential creators that could work for you in this case. But yeah, and I think like then we could cover maybe also the special case. I would say this is kind of a blend of the two of the earlier as well, because this can happen at all experience levels. But if we talk about a big launch, I think this is one very common event where advertisers do work with creators as well. For example, you're launching a new game, or there's like a big content update or expansion, or maybe it's like a big branding campaign you're running once or twice a year. I would say all of these go into this big one-time push / launch category. So I would say this is then kind of a special case that we also need to talk about. Because what you care about in these situations is getting the word out there and generating conversation at a big enough scale, or as big of a scale as possible. Because if you're able to do that, then you will also get more people to produce content out of it, or react to it, buy your products, install your games, and so on. So it kind of feeds upon itself, but you need that critical mass within a very short amount of time. And I think this is something creators can help generate to a huge extent. But yeah, like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like it's true for like new game launch, but like let's take like another use case where you could apply it as well. It's like a game with like a battle pass or with seasons. Anytime there's like new content that's coming in, and then depending on your budget, depending on your workflows, you could like trigger it at like different places. But let's say like new seasons come every month or every second month or something like this. You could like reactivate, bring back those players just by like reminding that the game is there. There's like new content, that it's fresh, just by like working with like creators like this. And that's super easy to put in place, because you need to just have the content ready on your side, know what you want to talk about, and then you just like let us do the rest, where it's like, okay, that's the timeline. We want all videos being published between this and this date, because that's the season start. get us X amount of views within this niche. That's another case where it's just like a one-time push, getting new players, getting the older ones, and we're working with creators in that sense make a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like here also good to remember a couple of rules of thumb. So first of all, like we mentioned in the previous case as well, you should definitely work with creators of all sizes to do this because
Yep.
they have viewers interested in the same space, but at the same time, um, you can maximize your reach if you work with different kind of creators because it's not always the same person watching different creators and so on. So you kind of broaden out as much as possible. I would say second, because you want that kind of engagement from this, and on average smaller creators have higher engagement in their audience. So you can use both the big creators to produce more of the critical mass, but at the same time hire a big number of small creators to also produce more of the engagement. And I think this also lets you optimize the CPM when you can hire a broad range of creators and you don't need to rely on a big name being available at that critical time, for example, because sometimes you might have to pay more to be able to hire them for a very specific time slot or something like this, for example. And yeah, just as a reminder, if you have a big launch coming up, you definitely should kind of start hiring creators early enough so you ensure the availability, because for you it's a very, very critical time frame that probably can't be moved. So you probably want to make sure creators are available, and of course with a tool like Matchmate, that's very easy to hire for a specific window very quickly. But even if you're doing this manually, you have to remember to kind of reserve more time than normal for the outreach, because not all
How
creators are going to be available at a specific time frame when you have the launch coming up.
What time frame are we talking about here, just so that everyone is clear on that?
I mean, this is very, very rough rule of thumb because it depends so much on like what kind of sponsorship segment do you want, like how hard will it be to produce, how long segments you want, and so on. But I would say with match made, something like a month before would be good, but the more time the better. So um, if you do this maybe a couple of months ahead of time, that's usually very good, I would say, already. And if you're doing it manually just because you need to reserve more time for the negotiations, then I would add maybe 2 to 4 weeks more on top of that, just to kind of that you handle the negotiation process manually, because that will take more time as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. I think that's just if we talk about the speed that we talked a little bit like earlier, it's like as soon as everything is like clear and that we have the offers that are ready to be sent, like the process takes no time. What takes a bit of time is just like getting the content to be approved. But if it's quite a broad category, that's also usually coming quite fast, like a week or so. Then we get it approved, we request some changes here or there, and then that's published. So I think like the months is definitely a good number, especially for a big one-time push. So yeah, that's a good range. Wanted to say also like for launch for like PC or console games, it's a little bit harder to track the performance than mobile games, because like mobile games we use those like tracking solutions like AppsFlyer, Adjust, and so on, where we really know that's the install, that's revenue from something like this. For Steam games, we have that opportunity to track a bit with like UTM parameters. We see the wish list, and then you can have some assumptions on like wish list to purchase or something like this. For console games, that's definitely a whole different story. So I think that's where you just want to maximize reach on that specific audience, so that the message gets across, and hopefully the sales will like continue on whatever platform online or in shops or something like this. Yeah, I don't know if you have thoughts on tracking for any of those like scenarios.
Yeah, I would say just exactly those, wish listing, for example, on PC. For mobile apps, mobile measurement partners, pretty straightforward there. On consoles or this kind of thing, if you're sending traffic to your website, for example, um, just you can track sort of interim metrics like uh, people going to, let's say, the PlayStation store, because you can make the purchase on your computer. You don't have to go on the store on the console to kind of make it. But of
True.
course, it's only going to be partial, so you do need to have maybe some sort of like organic uplift estimate. So if you're seeing
Yep.
more organic traffic, how does that correspond to increase in sales or something? So you just need to kind of have these other estimation methods available, I would say. All right, we're back in action after my camera decided to die in the middle of recording this session, but we managed to figure it out. So I guess this is kind of the perfect time to do our, let's say, our concluding thoughts. So um like we already discussed, three different scenarios, whether you're just starting out, when you're more experienced, and then when you have this bigger one-time promotion coming up. So I would say those are three very common scenarios, and how we would advise, doing each of these. Um, but yeah, overall, like if I were to summarize this on my end, I would maybe say there are a couple of rules of thumb that you should remember. First of all, you should use the right kind of automation so you reduce the time intensive manual tasks, because that way, what you can focus on is the more valuable stuff like strategies, testing out new channels, conducting analyses, doing more experiments to optimize a certain channel and so on, instead of sending emails to creators who haven't responded to your suggestion for a partnership, let's say. So having the right kind of automation in place, especially when you start scaling up or you have kind of this big collaboration where you need to hire a lot of creators at the same time, it's just going to be very crucial for you. And then the second is, which we already kind of touched upon in this first rule, but make sure you hire a broad spectrum of creators. Hire from the small to the very big, because this allows you to get both big reach, good engagement, great results, and of course to get that scalability, so you can keep running campaigns month over month, and keep growing the volume of your promotions as long as the performance is there as well.
Sure, I was thinking is like if someone is like not trying to like run this for like a really long time, it's not really helpful what we just like discussed about, or like the process that we discussed about. So yeah, I don't know. Really depends on like what product someone is like trying to build or market. So yeah, no, but my takeaways is like, yeah, like you said, there's like a couple of ways to scale on YouTube. One is hire people, do the manual work. That's definitely a valid option, as worked in some cases. The other one is definitely more for the pioneers or the explorers, I would say, where it's like put some automation in place, understand what's important to keep as like a process on your side, but what can go on the other side. And we're definitely happy to help when it makes sense there. And then, yeah, the small to mid-sized creators, there's definitely a lot that can be done in specific topics. Gaming is pretty much endless. I mean, like the number of like channels out there on the gaming niche is it's not even a niche anymore. It's just like massive. We don't know how many total YouTube channels are out there, but it's a huge number. So you have opportunities to reach out to like many different like people, many different audience through many creators for a really long time. If you have what we discussed at the beginning, that alignment of like creators are interested to promote your product, the audience makes sense, and the unit economic makes sense as well. Because if you expect 10, 20 cents new users, that's definitely going to be a challenge. But if it's like a little bit higher than this, there's definitely room, and there's definitely ways to like grow your business there. So yeah, that's my takeaway.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot for your thoughts, and I think we can conclude this session here and see you next time when we discuss another exciting creator marketing topic.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye bye.